what is the time limit we should actually consider them as reactivation or reacquisition?
First of all, new customer returning customers is different than warm and cold audiences, in my opinion.
And one rant I would like to plug in here is setting those conversion tracking inside the Google is messy.
PMAX, we do like to often put audiences in as the targeting signals. PMAX audiences are not audiences, they're signals. You're just kind of telling Google, hey, you should consider these people. And Google's like, okay, I'll think about it more.
So, Kirk, this is Vishnu, and we have amazing Kirk Williams with us from joining all the way from US. Thank you very much, Kirk. Nice to meet you. And how are you?
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Doing great. Just getting started with my day here. So I'm fresh and I have lots of coffee in me, so I'm good to go.
Amazing, amazing. Just for the sake of audience, Kirk, do you want to give a quick introduction about your background and your specialty and any interesting facts about you?
Yeah, sure. So I currently live in Billings, Montana. I was born and raised in the Midwest of the U.S. And so I've been doing PPC, pay-per-click marketing, Google Ads, right? All of those definitions kind of mean something different to everyone else. I usually call it PPC to, that's kind of old school of me, but I've been doing that about I think 15 or 16 years now. And really actually got my start back when everyone was just kind of starting out. Google Shopping was free at the time when I started. And so I even experienced like going paid for the first time with a client that I was working with. Yeah, so worked in-house at a little e-com shop, and then eventually went out on my own, got some clients as a consultant, eventually hired a few people. And so now I own Zato. We're just Google Ads, Microsoft Ads focused PPC agency. Then there's 6 of us with a couple of freelancers as well. And we do our best to try to know Google Ads really well and do that for clients. So
Amazing, amazing, Kirk. So whenever I meet people, it's such a huge experience. Not the Gen Zs, but the OGs. My first question generally is: do you want to give a timeline of things? What has happened? Where did you start, and what happened after that? From probably from 2011 to 2026, and how this whole thing has evolved. Because right now this all became toggles, right? Okay, you switch on this, you switch on this, you get this, you get this. But when we started in 2000, I started in 2009, 2010. That's when I started PPC marketing for the first time. It was a huge manual work, and most of the things are buggy, and there is no conversion tracking. There is no way to prove the results. All those things happen. So, do you want to give a timeline of things, what you see, and how do you build that whole knowledge of things happening?
yeah, for sure. That almost is exactly when I started as well. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because some of those of us who have been managing since then. So you were probably the same way. I remember having I would build my own bid rules, right? And that I would actually manually go in. And I loved when Google first put like saved, where you could like save, some of those the filters. And what I would do is go in and I would like look through search terms. I would click my saved filter where I had kind of, it's kind of similar like bidding rules type thing, is like they've spent this much, but they're this inefficient or whatever. And then I would like adjust those by like 10% down or, and one of the things that I think, so obviously we don't have to, do that for the most part anymore. There are times that I still like to do some manual bidding. I do not think that it's totally out, and you still have to do some of that, but and I can get into when we choose to do that, but for the most part, that's gone, right? I mean, for the most part, automation has done a lot of that. I still think that those of us who have experience, I don't know how to say it. It's like when you have experience like manipulating the auctions and seeing what happens manually, it's kind of like you get a better feel for actually what's going on in them. And I think that's one of the things that I think that sometimes us OGs or whatever you want to call it, I know people who have been in the industry way longer than me too, which is amazing. Sometimes we can get a bad rap kind of being old school, whatever. I think one of the benefits that we have is that I think we have from the beginning had a little bit of a better chance to rely on and manipulate things in the auction. So we kind of understand a little bit of what's going on. So now that things are more automated, it's still basically at this point still relatively the same in terms of how the Google auction works, in terms of ad ranking, stuff like that. There's changes that's occurred, but for the most part, ad ranking is ad ranking. And so I think that gives us sometimes an advantage of just being more aware of like what is happening in kind of a bigger picture strategic way. And yeah, so that's one thing, definitely, obviously it moves, over the course of the time, it's moved more from manual adjustments. And I'll try to answer your question a little bit. You asked kind of some of the things that have changed, right? It's been interesting, like as I observe, kind of, I've been in the weeds, so I've been in accounts for 16 years. I know friends like who their career path has been more they're in accounts and then they move to managing, which is great. I've just wanted to remain fresh on stuff, so I've tried to make sure that I'm also managing accounts, and I have ever since. And one of the things that I think, as I've been doing that, as I've observed over like Google ads, but some of this is marketing in general, is even in the early, even years and years ago, and I have the articles to back this up, I was suspicious of this aggressive idea of conversion tracking, and that being this like single source of truth for your channel in kind of a we can solve all of the problems because we can track it attribution way. And one thing that's interesting, so we had a period of time where there wasn't really conversion tracking. Conversion tracking comes in Google Ads. Everyone says, okay, now we know exactly what's going on, which was not true, but everyone thought that. We know what's going on. So now what happens is we optimize strictly to try to get more of those conversions. So what's happening now, a huge shift, and this has to do with privacy as well as automation and some of these things, is what's happening now is we're actually more aware of the complexity of the user journey. Some of that's been forced on us because of privacy, but it's actually more difficult to actually know what is when I pushed this button with this ad, how did that directly contribute to that sale, right? We're starting to realize the complexity that I think has always existed. And I actually think now we're entering the stage, especially as AI enters, now we're entering the stage where us Google Ads people have gone more from like technical, adjust little bid modifiers. We're going from there to we're actually getting more back into marketing and needing to understand way better how our work is impacting the whole business and doing a better job of all of that. So that's kind of my long maybe ramble, to answer your question about like what's changed over the last 16 years.
Yeah. No, I totally agree because we started running an summit very recently. And in that summit, people were trying to optimize the algorithm with clicks and creatives and stuff. But nobody bothered to look into the positioning of the summit, why someone should attend. The moment we fix that, automatically the eventual summit got entirely done. So unless you fix the basic problem of marketing, there is no way the algorithm is going to help you. The algorithm is going to give you the boost, but the foundational structure still needs to be marketing. And unless we fix that, the signals or the conversion tracking or the optimization is not going to work at all. And making that realize the founders, making it realize the media agencies was the biggest task we generally go and explain them. So that's how we also educate them. And another analogy we generally give is the conversion tracking or all those things is like a lighthouse. This is just a guiding signal that you are going in the right path, but don't worry too much. This is not like a GPS where you are exactly going to the destination, but this is a guiding signal like a lighthouse. Making the transition is always a hard discussion with people whenever they say, hey, why this is not happening, why this is not happening.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've ever heard specifically the lighthouse analogy, and I really like that. And my experience so far, I have limited experience. We're a small agency, so like, yeah, we've looked at a lot of accounts over the time, but also like I admit, it's not like thousands. Um, all that to say, like as we have worked on accounts, I think every single time we've actually experienced a business that actually does what people hope, which is scale, right? I mean, everyone wants the business that scales, but obviously, as we all know, it's hard to do that. It's hard to figure that out. There's so many reasons that happens, but every single time, one of the factors that I observe is they look at marketing revenue as direct, or as like channel. They look at channel revenue and goals as directional rather than these aggressive, like have to hit targets that like stifle things. So directionally, they're just looking at are exactly what you said. Are we going in the right direction? Let's definitely do tests. Let's make sure we are. Let's be accurate. But also at the end of the day, it's kind of this almost like if the tide is rising, then it's almost like we don't care as exactly like how, like where exactly the water is coming from. Like let's track that. Let's be careful. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be careful. I'm just saying over time, those who I've seen do well, it's like they're excited the tide's rising, so they just keep allowing the tide to rise. And
Absolutely.
so many times the people who are so obsessed with especially profitability, revenue on ad spend, profit on ad spend, people who are obsessed with that, I just more times than not see that limit their ability to grow rather than not. It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's quite interesting, and that's what leads me to the LinkedIn post you have done regarding the new customers. And do you want to give a background story of that, if you can? And also, another follow up question I have for that is, uh, I totally agree with it. The returning customers who have died is not returning customers anymore. So you need the nudge. You try to nudge them with the email and you try to nudge them at WhatsApp. They did not convert, and you're using external channels to nudge them again. So, which is fair. Now, the question is, what is the time limit we should actually consider them as reactivation or reacquisition? So, how do you define that, and how would marketers would ideally be should be looking at that angle?
Hmm. Yeah, so I'll do what's normal for me, and others who know me may know that might be annoying for other people, which is I'm going to try to not quite answer that question yet by trying to give some like background, context, philosophy that I think is all really important to that. Because exactly, and I understand, that's what we're doing on this is, you ask a specific question. What I find is that people think there's a specific answer, right? That they're hoping I'm like, oh, it's 6 months or whatever. And for me, there's a couple of big picture things that work into this. So the idea of new customer, returning customer, stuff like that. So I'll try to back up and do my best to weave it all together. Um, so so uh, so first of all, that LinkedIn post came from actually a conversation I was having with someone, another marketer, and we were kind of chatting, and they were talking about this challenge that they were having. And throughout the course of that conversation, I kind of started to begin to realize I don't think the client fully understands what they're doing with Google Ads. What I observed was this marketer and the client were doing all they could to limit growth with Google Ads because they were so obsessed and focused on they only wanted new customers. So it was almost this like they almost were saying, no, we don't want to grow with returning customers. I know they weren't saying that, but that is what was happening because all of the energy was going into to almost trying to stop return customers. And so there's a big picture thing here. Like, first of all, new customer returning customers is different than warm and cold audiences, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of an important thing. um, when people these days talk about new customers, they're for the most part they're just talking about someone whose email they don't have in their CRM, right? Like someone who's never purchased from them, right? So a warm and cold audience is a little bit different because when you're talking within, let's say, Google Ads, we like to use prospecting or remarketing language. You can have a new customer or a return customer or you can have a new customer who you have actually spent thousands of dollars advertising to that you are trying to get in front of, who continues to look and continues to collect ads and stuff like that. So all that to say, sometimes people all assign a new customer value as if you're only spending the same marketing costs on them. And that is not always true. You can have a new customer who has hit you for the first time in an ad, in a prospecting ad, or you can have a new customer who you've already spent $1,000 trying to acquire. So first of all, I actually think brands just need to ponder that for a second as they're trying to do the math. Because really what brands are trying to do, and this is part of what I'm saying, I think, is that we're obsessed with new versus returning customer. And I think what they're trying to do more is just say like, hey, what is an incremental sale we would have got from this person, especially who doesn't actually know us, that then we can figure out with the LTV that we wouldn't have otherwise received. So when we say, oh, that's the actual question, then all of a sudden, then you can start going back to saying, when does it matter between new and returning? Why do we need to be obsessed with new? Because, and then my point in what I made in my LinkedIn post was, if you have someone who, let's just say let's say protein powder, protein shakes, if you have someone who bought from you a protein shake 6 months ago, which in the land of one person bought a $20 protein shake box from you, that is not remotely a loyal customer 6 months ago. So if you have someone like that, and now they're within Google Ads and they are searching in Google a generic, hey, what's the best protein powder mix out there? What I would say is, regardless of the time frame, that person is not a loyal customer to you. It doesn't matter whether you have the email in your CRM or not. You need to advertise to them to reacquire them, acquire them. And so I think that's kind of a big part of where I'm getting at. And then I'll quick note, there's even a difference between Google and Meta with this conversation as well. That's a big part of this as well, because Google by nature is capturing existing demand, which means someone is communicating their intent of search. And again, we see a little bit more clearly with intent than just some audience person out there. Because I admit there's probably different ways that a Meta advertiser needs to think about this for sure. From a Google landscape, that's where I'm looking at that. And I'm saying to my clients, hey, you want to get new customers. That's really important. Also, though, we need to not lose out on the people, even if they are returning customers, the people who are out there searching in non-branded ways, who are evidencing by their search intent that they're not a loyal customer. So if worse comes to worse, what I like to consult with our clients and suggest is that we have different targets for new customer and returning customer. So we do try to be more profitable on our returning customers, just because we have spent more, marketing dollars on them already, but that we're not like ignoring them. We're just holding them to a higher ROAS target maybe, but we're still aggressively going after them within the goals, so that again, we can grow everything, not just be obsessed with new customers only. So there's my rant on that, taken from LinkedIn to in person.
No, I mean, I totally get it, right? So there is no defined number, but there is always a logic. Okay, if someone is not buying from you in the set span of time and he is practically dead, which eventually means you have to go and reacquire him, whether it is a new positioning, whether it is a new branding, and you have to go and tell them, hey, look, we are here, please remember us. And especially with Google, like you just mentioned, this is a search. This is not like pure discovery like Meta, but you would be able to, and if he's searching, he's definitely searching. And if you don't remember, if he's not remembering him, like you posted on your LinkedIn, he eventually forgot about you, which eventually means you need to reacquire the customer, and you cannot consider them like a returning customer. So that's the whole game here. No, I really like it, and I think we wish we have a framework so that the founders and the marketers sort of understand, okay, look, this is how I want to capture them as returning customer or repeat purchase or whatever that is. So that makes absolute sense. Another personal question, Kirk, why only Google Ads? Why not Meta? Why are you stuck with Google Ads?
Yeah. Let me quick take on to that last one, and then I'll answer this one. To your point, and into the broader Meta in that, I do think that there is some level where each individual business or industry can look at their engagement rates and identify some level of what they define as new customer, returning customer. And again, that's also where I say that just depends so much on industry. I mean, to go into wild extremes, someone purchasing a protein shake or someone purchasing a car, there's just going to be there's going to be a different length of time in which they're ready to do that next purchase. But then that's where my suggestion to clients and people listening would be, again, like, stop just pushing them into these boxes and not marketing to return customers, because that's what I'm arguing about, is almost this, like, I've seen this mentality that almost stops marketing to return. And to me, it's like cross sell to those, stop stop only thinking of them as new or returning. Be like, okay, so these people are returning. They brought, okay, so maybe even if you're selling cars, they bought a car. Well, now, what can you do in terms of upgrades or accessories or stuff like that, where you can, you can get in front of them with email and that sort of thing. Again, like thinking outside the box and just getting rid of this, like, we only care about new customers, I think needs to happen in D2C. I think so. Anyways, it's something I've seen slip in more and more. And again, I actually think that that's brands who are stifling their own growth when they think what they're doing is only obsessing over new customers. And they've also have to figure out a way to sell to returning.
Makes sense.
Gosh, I got going so much into that, I forgot. Oh, Meta Google. Yeah, that was
Meta Google.
question. Yeah. No, I just hate Meta. So we tried adding it in about like 10 years ago. And it was just one of those things where at the time, I didn't know how to price it. Because there's the weird creative aspect on it. I didn't like, I would get into the campaigns. It was just a different UI. I knew Google. I loved it. So some of this was personal. I wanted to talk about Google, whatever. And so I got to this point where I realized I kind of either need to go all in, even like invest, lose money quite a bit, maybe hire someone really good at Meta, figure this out and add it on, or just like play the game I was and focus on what I was good at. And I chose the latter. So
makes sense. Makes absolute sense. Yeah. No, I started with Google, right? So there was no Meta ads when we started, and Google ads was like more the more the keywords, search intent, and all those things. And when I started with the Meta for the first time, I was like, why would someone wants to buy it? It would make sense to give an ad because they are searching for something related. You show them the ad and you make them buy. But why would someone buy in Meta? Because you're just randomly saying this age group, I want to target them and eventually be able to do it. So that was the thought process. But yeah, a lot have changed, and Meta, we have been looking at the whole game. The whole game has changed as well. So now I do like Meta a lot, equal to Google. But one thing as a follow-up, from Meta, Google started this Google Merchant Center, which is like a discovery platform right now. And I have a very specific question. Maybe you can just explain about GMC, and if you have any setups done on the GMC, especially for product tracking, we could just touch base on that as well. Because almost 85% of the accounts, when I audit them, they don't track the cart data. And how important is the cart data, especially for the GMC to work? And your opinion on GMC shopping campaigns, and especially the cart data tracking inside the purchase, because that's the signal what GMC needs.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I'll start with maybe just tracking and cart data and that sort of thing, and then we can go, maybe if you have another, if you have more questions or whatever, that's fine. So so my thought on that is that so Meta cart data and those additional signals, from what I've seen, again, I'm an outsider, I fully admit it, but from what I've seen, it's pretty crucial. And one of the things that I've determined is from what I've observed is that Meta between its audiences and then its pixel seems to like have this magic to it where feeding it all of that data just really seems to help. I do not see the same thing with Google. So when we will track cart data. We keep it as what's called a secondary conversion within Google Ads. We typically do not turn that on. We typically do not want our shopping and PMAX targeting cart data as well. And the simple reason is we have observed it actually hinder true performance. And again, this is somewhat of a theory. Like I don't understand quite why that is, other than there must be something within how the two platforms are built where Meta seems to understand this better. But Google, what we found when we do just run it after cart data as well as, and then like if you connect like a Shopify app, let's say, and turn on the conversions, because sometimes some of those apps have that ability, like the Google and YouTube app and Shopify is kind of known for that, right? You can turn on the conversion tracking, and typically it'll create 3 conversions: purchase, add to cart, and begin checkout. We'll typically turn off add to cart and begin checkout and turn those to secondary. And the reason is because what we've seen is when PMAX and Google Shopping sometimes actually starts to run after those people, it is, you're telling it, here's all of this revenue data, so we want you to hit, especially if we're using conversion value bidding, here's the profitability that we want you to hit. It's using all of this revenue data from not sales, from carts and checkout. Yeah. And it's almost like what it does is it's like, oh, you like, these people are easier to target than people who actually want to buy from you. And so it runs after people who like, and even bots that we've identified that like add things to cart and not necessarily purchase. And it's almost like it can develop this whole like targeting to the wrong people of just like add to cart people rather than actual purchasers. And so we typically actually avoid actually targeting our bidding platforms after add to cart data for that reason, because we've just seen it go horribly in the past. So I guess that's my thought on that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Never ever optimize the campaign for add to cart. It is going to get crazy at all. I'll give you a small example. So the same summit when we were running, and we were trying to optimize for the scroll depths, and the whole Meta went after 50 to 60 age group, and because scroll depths. And then we changed the conversion tracking into purchase of the passes, and it started targeting 25 to 40, that range, which is the ideal target audiences. So when you go for the add to carts or product views or page view tracking, page view conversion event, eventually the Meta, not just Meta, but also the Google is going to go after the people who are cheap, but eventually not going to convert at all. So it's very important to have the right primary conversion, especially on the Google. And one rant I would like to plug in here is setting those conversion tracking inside the Google is messy. They have made it as hard as possible in recent days with the new UI updates. And it's practically, you missed marking them as secondary conversions, and you'll see all the conversions going up on the UI. Like, why would you want to do that? So it's very important that the market as secondary conversion, and you plug in that default app inside the Shopify, and it will mark all of them as primary conversions, and it will start going haywire, all your numbers looking bad. Another issue with Google Ads is you cannot. So once they mark it as primary conversion show in the dashboard, you cannot actually remove them from the primary conversions. So it'll still be there. All your baselines, all your ROAS, everything goes topple just because they've defaulted those events as primary conversions. And going one step deeper, Kirk, especially on the GMC and other things. Regularly, whenever we meet people, they have several categories of products inside GMC, right? So every good company which has, let's say, 100 and 200, 300 SKUs. and they have multiple categories of the product. And what are the good strategies we could use so that all the categories of the products are being sold in parallel, not just one category of the product in the GMC? So how do you generally set up the campaigns which make sure all the categories gets the equal benefit, whether they get sold or not? That's secondary issue, but then at least we would be able to push all the categories together. What would you do, and how do you structure those campaigns?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the question, because I think campaign organization is, a really big question for people. And I like to step back and say, okay, we were talking about like the 2016, like a decade ago sort of thing. I think campaign organization as a tactic was far more influential to an account success than it is now. And a lot of that is because of Google AI and stuff. And so if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, we have 1,000 products, 1,000 SKUs, and we have 20 different categories, how would you set up a Google Shopping, PMAX, that sort of thing? One of the first things I'm doing is not just immediately saying, okay, how do I get every category to Google so that Google gives it equal share? Because that may not be what we want. So for instance, one of the things I'm doing is just initially asking the client, like, what products sell the best? like what are your top sellers? Because so many businesses, it's like 20% of their SKUs are their main ones, right? So as I learn that, and they might say, okay, out of 1,000 products, these are the 15 that make up 80% of our sales. Okay, well, I have stopped caring about categories in a sense. I still like to categorize my campaigns by that at some level, just so that we can, bid and keep things together. But suddenly I'm way more concerned about ensuring that what we're doing, rather than organizing around categories, let's say, or brands or whatever, now what I want to do is I want to make sure that their top 15 SKUs they just told me about, I want to make sure that we're investing most of our energy in getting those found by Google, because those are more likely to purchase. And then what I like to do is ensure that, yeah, those others do have budget and ability for Google to investigate and see, maybe there are some other SKUs in there that Google can find that, connect with the right audience and blah, blah, blah. So then we'll make sure that they do have some budget. And sometimes that may be, it's going to depend on, every account. We try to kind of figure it out and build it for every account. A lot of times that could be as simple as, having a few different campaigns where we have their like top sellers, and then maybe we have more of a everything else sort of shopping campaign where we have the categories by ad group or something like that. Because if you have target ROAS bidding within a shopping campaign, you can set individual target ROAS on ad group level. And so then we can at least kind of monitor for a little bit and see if there are any that naturally Google begins to push budget towards and begin to sell in that. That may over time, like, again, if we're just starting out, we have no data, then over time, maybe we'll start shifting some SKUs around into like a top products campaign or something like that. But I tend to be a little bit more curious about for a business, about some of, like, we talk about the strategy side. I'm a little more curious about, like, who are we advertising to? What are the main products? Like, how should we think about that? And then we build the structure for that. Whereas in the old days, it was more of a structure first. It was kind of like, hey, we're successful because this is the structure we use all the time. Now that's almost flipped for me.
Yeah. And so we came across this client recently. They have like 3 brands, right? So sorry, 3 categories. One is like men, the other one is like women, the other one is for kids. Now, the problem what they started facing is they used to have 3 different websites earlier. And as part of the branding exercise, they brought all these categories of things into single particular website. Now, each of them has separate procurement managers, separate D2C heads. So for example, for men, they have a separate D2C head. For women, they have separate D2C head. Now, the problem with the women D2C head is they're not able to scale that campaign at all. I'm talking about 80-90% dip in that particular category. So in those instances, especially on the shopping campaign, especially on things, the algorithm was trying to push men, 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 but all the products, which is like women products, they were not able to push it at all. And again, they're now trying to go ahead and convert that into a double website. So one is specifically for the women and one is specifically for the men. How do you see this happening, and is there any way they could have done better in terms of pushing the women category in terms of campaign setups or things like that? I know you don't have the background campaign setup, but then they tried their best. Honestly, they tried their best. But I mean, if you're a Walmart, you don't want to create two websites to sell two different categories, right? So it should have been done inside one Google account.
Yeah, so I would initially start, like you said, there's like that's not much information, but also like there is some information there. So like to me, it's like, okay, let's start with some questions. I wanna know, why isn't the women scaling, the women's part
Yeah,
scaling, right? So we're like I would start just gathering information. Because I think there's a different solution that you can make. So first of all, why isn't the women scaling? Okay, is there a lot of traffic but low sales? So is it like, so is low conversion rate, which oftentimes points to maybe there is an issue with the website. Maybe the website is just not geared for in a way which sells to women or something like that, right? There's kind of a, if people are typing in, and I don't know the industry, but let's say it's apparel, clothing. Like if someone is typing
yeah,
in like best women's dresses, and you drop them on a page for women's dresses and no one ever wants to buy, again, there's some level of like, okay, let's pause and determine, like, we're sending people, why aren't they? Okay, so if that's not the issue, I'm also looking into like impression share and click share. Okay, so how much available traffic, how much available ad placements are there for women's dresses? Even so, is the scaling issue the fact that there's just not enough placements for what we're advertising for what we're going for? Is that the issue? Like there are, I think like that's where I like to just start with all those questions of even trying to determine, like, I'm not just running towards okay, let's try to figure out why they aren't scaling, let's put more money in, but more like what is the underwriting thing that's happening? Are they not converting, or is there not enough, are there not enough ad impressions out there? So for instance, let's say that there's let's say that they're getting like a 4% impression share, which means there's a ton of available impressions. There's a lot of room for them to scale and grow, but they're just not in them. Okay, that's like a positioning or a bidding problem. If we're talking shopping ads, I might be trying to optimize the feed a little bit to see if we can get more of those attributes so Google places us more. I might be seeing what our cost per click is to just determine, on average, are we underbidding? If so, like, it's as simple as like, let's get a more aggressive in our bidding, right? Our budgeting, right? So that's some of that. If the impressions are, if we're starting on non-brand, if we're starting to get up into 50, 60, 70% impression share, which is crazy high for non-brand, which means there's no more room to scale. And this is a really crucial point to what Google Ads is as an ad platform, which is capturing existing demand. And here's kind of an
yeah,
important thing for people to realize with this is, if it's like, okay, if what's hindering us from scaling is that we don't have enough people searching, then the solution is to actually increase demand. And that's the sort of thing where then we take that to a client and we're like, hey, um, you need to spend more money in the upper funnel. Like you need to start
yeah,
pumping more into YouTube, Meta, that sort of thing. Like, so that's more of a, that it's almost like that's the problem to solve now. So you want to scale women's dresses in Google Ads. And now what we're saying is, the way you're going to scale women's dresses in Google Ads is by actually increasing dramatically the amount of advertising you're doing to women on Facebook, so that then they are coming back to Google and searching, and that sort of thing. So I think that's the way
Makes sense.
I try to look at those sort of conundrums and not run just immediately to like, let's increase bids or something like that, unless that is the solution.
Yeah, yeah. No, they had a very good brand. We're talking about millions of ad spend in yeah, maybe millions of ad spend per year on Google Ads, and they never able to crack to sell women apparel, despite having the biggest brand pull towards them, and they have been regarded as one of the good brand in India, but. That issue they're not able to sell. Even for me,
Was it like a
yeah.
conversion rate issue?
No, I mean, the ads are not being served for women feed at all. So the conversion rate, if you look at their actual 1P data, the conversion rates are good. So people who are coming and landing and buying, they're good, but they're not able to scale their Google ads for women at all. We're talking about 10, 15, 20 sales per day, whereas their actual the 1P data, the website is converting at 300, 400, but Google is not able to push those. So most likely, I think it's probably how they structured the whole campaigns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's kind of what I wonder. Again, without seeing into it, then I'm curious to see, okay, if you're happy with conversions but you're not scaling, then to me that is one of those times where, yeah, let's actually get into the organization, and let's say on search, like that's where we start to become way less restrictive on things like match types and stuff. We're starting to open the gates a little bit more
Yeah.
to say, okay, let's really broaden this out. Let's get some audiences, some broad terms, and really try to expand that out, see what comes in. Maybe we'll build more ad groups based upon those that we are seeing, and start to build up from there. Shopping ads, feed optimization, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
if it sounds like from what they're saying, then yeah, perhaps that is more of a yeah, that could be more of an account organization and expansion issue. Yeah.
And I'm going to show you a graph, Kirk, and I just want to know how would you solve it as a marketer. So the graph, what you're seeing here is it's one of the brand which has about 25,000 SKUs, and out of 25,000 SKUs, 24,000 SKUs has the spend, and only 1,217 has the sales. Right? And even this 1,200, we're talking about 45 of them are actually below the baseline of in terms of the ROAS. So which means that you are spending way too much to convert these guys. So look at the CPAs and other details here. So it is consuming a lot, and it is way under your baselines, whether it is a CPA, whether it is a ROAS, but this is what consuming your money. So in this instance, how do you manage this?
Sorry, you cut up at the end. I think the question was, how do you manage that?
Yeah, how do you manage that?
Yeah. So, so let's just say, shop, as we're thinking about like shopping ads or PMAX, whatever it might be. This is a great case where typically what we're doing is we are trying to, as much as possible, separate out, then like I was saying, those products that are doing well from the products that tend to be higher cost. So one of the things that I want to make sure that we do is if we have a limited number of products that are primarily selling profitably, I want to make sure that those products basically get as much budget as Google wants to give them, until the efficiency starts to dip, because sometimes you'll see that as well. But so typically what that looks like for me with management is I want to try to segment those out, those groups, when we're dealing with that many SKUs, 25,000 SKUs. That's typically where we're going to try to segment things out. And I mean, I'm shooting from the hip because there's a lot to think through, but this may look like either standard shopping, or maybe we try like a feed only PMAX campaign for some of those like high value products, pull those into their separate thing. And then and then I'd probably dig into my own data just to make sure I'm in terms of like the actual products. And what I would try to do is actually find products that really are just endlessly harmful. So, one thing I see, if we're talking, 25,000 with, I lost it, but,
Sorry,
20, 25,000 or so with spend and no conversions, I think.
Yeah, you are right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 20,000 no purchases. I don't necessarily want to like just ignore those. So I'd probably try to look through some of those. One of the things I like doing with those is actually analyze them and try to, and I often will ask the client on other channels, what are your top selling SKUs? And then I like to compare their other channels top selling SKUs with our products that are not purchasing. I like to do that sometimes because then I like to see, are there any products that should be selling on Google typically? And they're different channels, but it does give you a little bit of an idea. Are there products that like are really good across all the others, email, Meta, that sort of thing, that are not that Google's not even really showing on in shopping? Sometimes you'll see, oftentimes there will be some of those SKUs that get lumped into into Google not spending on them. And some of that is simply because with limited budget and stuff like that, Google's just shoving budget where it can, where it thinks is going to work. So sometimes what you have to do in those instances is even pull those products out as well into their own, depending on your organization, campaign or ad group, and actually kind of force Google to give them some budget, because so far Google hasn't, because there's just so many products for your budget. So I think that's one way that we'll look at stuff like that when we have that volume of data is we're trying to help Google. There is over optimizing with Google, and sometimes that means like you actually need to stop building out so many PMAX or shopping campaigns and let Google have more data and let Google optimize based on like the audiences and the information it has. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes it's really important to do the opposite, which is, if you have 25,000 products and you have, $1,000 a day spend, you actually, like, Google doesn't have enough budget to successfully market all of those. So it's choosing the ones it believes are most likely to convert and invest in that. So sometimes you have to pull out some of those and give them their own budget to kind of like coax Google, hey, don't forget about these as well. So sometimes we think about it like that. There's just, I mean, there's other things too that we test and try, but that's at least more philosophically like how I'd think about probably those based on that.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's happening. No, it's happening. It's happening.
I see it on
It's
mine
fine.
too.
It's fine. It's fine. And Kirk, I think this is a really great explanation in terms of how you see it. And I'm seeing that on GMC, and I'm seeing the same trend on Meta as well. We are able to sell very less number of unique products, and most of the other products are not being sold. Either if you really focusing on the ROAS, you have to turn down it and group this product sets which is selling, and then start running the campaigns. Just because you upload the feed, just because you switch on the PMAX or shopping campaigns, it is not going to sell everything. It is going to only bleed in the background. So that's what we are seeing in the overall areas. So another question regarding the audience. Once again, let me share my screen quickly. Okay, so you have this audience manager, right? Is there any tips, tricks, hacks you would be willing to share in terms of how to use these data segments, and especially these customer types? So have you used it before? And if you are using it, any tips and hacks you would want to tell our viewers?
Yeah. So let's see. So we'll build custom audiences for sure. I mean, this is going to depend on the exact client, the exact situation. to me, more exhaustive customer, customer list than that is more important. It like becomes more important as the sales cycle gets longer, right? like like a super short sales cycle. I mean, it's still good to, for to me, it's just always good to like optimize, audiences, have audiences in there, like add to cart, stuff like that, like we were discussing.
Yeah.
That's just always good to utilize, obvious ones like that. As sales cycles get longer, that's when we do try to get more creative with exactly, sort of trying to figure out, the qualified leads and that sort of thing. Like I said, we primarily are e-commerce. Um, some of the custom segments that we've done in the past, I'm a big fan of building audiences based on okay, I'm trying to think, let's say some specific examples, like like competitor audiences I like. So going in and creating a custom audience where you're just calling out your main competitors, you're just like people who have visited these sites, right? um or I like building custom audiences around, like let's say we're marketing to expectant mothers, mothers who are pregnant, sort of deal. We might build custom audiences around a variety of different websites they might be looking at, like stroller or buggy purchasing, or just newborn, like infant formula, stuff like that, right? um so I think that's one way that you can think creatively of those. And then you can kind of, within, like, let's say, you can add those into shopping, for instance. I'm a big fan of adding in audiences into shopping ads with just observation only. I've never heard this confirmed by Google. We've seen at times, even though Google says they take all of this stuff into account, we've seen performance increase just by calling out like specific audiences in optimization. So not targeting, right? But even with no bid modifier. Okay, so just saying, hey, we care about this audience in a shopping campaign, we've seen performance improve. So I do think it's worth just like adding solid ones in there, even just to observe them. um Based on the bidding model, based on the bidding model, again, this is more old school, but if you're doing more of a manual type thing, you can even adjust bid modifiers on those audiences based on their performance. PMAX, we do like to often put audiences in, as the targeting signals. Real important note that, as a reminder to everyone, PMAX audiences are not audiences, they're signals. You're just kind of telling Google, hey, you should consider these
Yeah.
people. And Google's like, okay, I'll think about it more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not the same as with shopping and search. It's not you saying these people. That being said, just as a quick note, Microsoft shout out, actually. My friend Nava is the Microsoft evangelist, and she has noted that Microsoft PMAX, their targeting signals, I think I'm forgetting her exact words, but it seems like Microsoft like respects those in its algorithm more, or something like that. So just as a call out, if you're using Microsoft Performance Max, definitely get some targeting signals in there just to kind of like help guide, these are the type of people we're going at. And that can sometimes, if someone has different asset groups, maybe you do want to have different asset groups that have different creative that's geared towards mothers or fathers or something like that, right? You can kind of,
Amazing.
you can get a little bit more specific there with Microsoft. Yeah, so those are some ways that we think about audiences and utilizing them.
Nice. So one question on the data, Kirk. So now most of the marketers we know, they eventually settle down on the platform data. And how important do you think they should start looking at the first party data in terms of what's really happening in the store, what's really happening in the website, and then guide the algorithms towards improving that? And uh, how do you do it? And if you have one suggestion to the people on how to make that happen, what would that be?
Yeah. Um, so for sure, so any chance you can move to collect, first party data, or like in Google, it's called enhanced conversions as well, where it's mapping an email, or it's mapping some identification about a person. do that as much as possible, because that does make it more accurate within your platform. And I think this is what you're referring to, almost more like, what about internal numbers and internal tracking and the data that you have, like on Shopify or something like that. And to me, making that shift is really crucial, and I think more people are starting to do this. But I just think here's how I kind of try to look at this is I'm trying increasingly to have my main source of truth be whatever it is my client's source of truth is, and which almost inevitably is some form of what they care about is gross revenue and something like a MER, media efficiency ratio.
Yep.
Basically all ad spend divided by gross revenue, right? Everyone has different ways of calculating or whatever. That's the simplistic way. And what I'm starting to like is keeping track of that and working with clients based on their internal numbers, and then utilizing our channel tracked advertising costs and profitability in that as more of that directional thing like we were telling you about. And what that does is it allows us to, especially when we also then can see other marketing channels spend and impact as well, that just allows us to be way more aware of what's actually happening in the business, with our ad channel. And as an example, this is really crucial to know as let's say Google, where you're capturing existing demand, because if you're working in a client, so this might happen, right? Maybe we're working in a client where we're spending $50,000 a month on Google Ads, and they're spending $500,000 on Meta, right? Meta is a generating, there's bottom funnel Meta as well, but also Meta does a lot of generating of new customers and that sort of thing. That's great. It's good at that. So if you think about it, like if we are doing their Google Ads and we're managing it, it's really important that we know if there are any major shifts in Meta over the last couple of weeks with spend or revenue and that sort of thing, because that's directly going to impact the demand capture side of Google. And so I just find that, like, actually it's just really crucial more and more for you as a Google Ads marketer to actually be understanding the big picture, even if you're not doing anything with those channels. So then as you are pushing your buttons or spend or that sort of thing, you can better even track like what are your contributions doing on the overall revenue as well. Then you can just keep track of like what are other changes on demand creation side and that sort of thing that would impact you. And it's just so much better to have everyone all on the same page than to just have you siloed in Google Ads looking at whatever Google reports as revenue and spend.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we shift into that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Locking in only on the Google Ads platform, just that graph which I showed you, it will only show you what's working inside the Google, but it will never show you what's working inside the actual website. So in an ideal way, you would want to replicate the success of what's happening in the website and scale that back in the Google Ads. That's the way we should ideally position and look into. And one final question. Have you heard of the term signal engineering? And what is your feeling about it?
So I've heard of it. I'm not like super familiar with it. But I could be wrong, but from what I can tell, I think like Google's been doing this for a while, right? Just in terms of like, it was interesting as I've looked into signal engineering. I think it's kind of like, man, I think a lot of us have been doing this. What is it like building? Trying to determine what are these different signals that in someone's path, and then like engineering for them. Is that accurate? Do I have that?
No, so basically it's like if you want to optimize for a certain category, you would create a conversion event and eventually optimize that particular campaign for that particular category. So whichever the business objective we want to try and reach, rather just sending purchase, we would try and optimize the campaigns for that particular business objective. So if you want to sell a category of women products, you'll set up your campaigns, you'll set up the catalogs according to the women products, and then rather sending purchase, you will start sending women purchase. So eventually the algorithm will try and understand who is actually buying from it. So that's the basics of signal engineering.
I gotcha. I thought it was even more like with like MQLs and SQLs and that sort of thing, where you're kind of
Same.
focusing on
But that's also
if there's a campaign that's a little bit. Okay. I don't think I've fully heard of it or realized that some are doing that on the e-commerce side. Exactly that. So it's like they're only sending sales from like the like women dresses or something like that to that. Gosh, I'd have to think about that. My initial thought is I don't like that because of that. So this is a super like gut response. Is one thought is again to what I said way in the beginning, which is are you trying to get things so accurate by doing that you actually start to silo off important data? So even just things like, gosh, like what about someone who like let's say my wife is like looking for a dress and then she buys it and then she's like, oh, and here are some like pants for my husband, and then like, oh, this is a cool outfit for my kid too. Okay, well in that order there's like three different things. Like so I think that I have some concerns with wondering just like, are you shrinking your available data set as well as like siloing some of that for no reason? And I don't know, maybe those who do it love it and are very successful at it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So we have done an experiment, and I really like the analogy you brought in. I'll show you one experiment one of our customer ran. I'll just quickly take it through that. So there are 3 levels of campaigns, and one campaign focused on men, one campaign focused on women, and then the AOV to keep that ROAS areas. So here what we were looking at is whenever you try and run these campaigns towards that, it actually start producing, but not for women. The reason for that is women also buy the products for men. That's the reason why why this is not showing the exact data. So it's not that woman is buying only for the women is also buying for the men. So if you are a smart marketer, what would you do is you will create a product set which will eventually have, especially targeting women, you will do both men watches and the female watches. So that's what we were able to figure out. But when you try to do this optimization, the model is able to figure out women buys men and women watches, but they would be able to figure out, okay, these are the kind of people buy these kind of products. So that's what we were able to figure out with this category level optimizations. And especially on the meta catalog optimization, this is working really, really, really well. We haven't done that in GMC yet, but inside the meta, it has been working really well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'd be curious to know. I mean, I'll let you guys experiment for me and then tell me what you think. That's a really interesting point about that, and that's been a marketer problem for a while, right? Is that you have people who buy different things for other people on different devices, and that. The other thing I think is, my understanding based upon what Google says about their bidding algorithms is also like they're basically doing signal engineering as part of their bidding algorithms anyways, based upon all the data they have, right? And they're even utilizing data that's way beyond what we can, like data like, hey, this person was just also searching for this other stuff or things like that too.
Yep.
And so I think that's just where I'm a little hesitant to try to again with the whole like how do we adjust, and that is the challenge of the 2026 PPC marketer. And that's where maybe this is end, right? Is like how do you adjust? Yeah, how do you adjust and help guide, but not like but not so over control that you're removing information.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. When you build models, especially in the machine learning, what we generally do is we call this boxing problem. So you don't want to box and overtrain or overfit the algorithm towards just one thing. So that's the technical term. And I mean, Meta and Google both are smart algorithms. It doesn't overtrain and over optimize, but what we can generally do is cut down the noise. Okay, I want to sell the shirts, and here are the people who are buying it. Can you learn from it? So that's the kind of optimization we are expecting to do, so that you cut down the noise of people buying pants, you cut down the noise of people buying, I don't know, watches or hats or whatever it is. You will only send the people who are buying the shirts. So that's the concept behind it.
Mm-hmm. Why not just do that as an audience?
So audience is one level down. So now that we don't have any control on the audiences in terms of who buys what and what they are trying to do, so there is no point in creating an audience. But audience is converted into a different signals, especially on Google, like I just showed you. You have high value purchases, disengaged customers. That's where we started the whole discussion. So you create disengaged customers, you have high value purchases. But very specific to the audience is basically people who came to the website. But what you want is to power the discovery. So people, when they are searching for shirts, you want to pop up the shirt of your own ad. That's the whole idea of discovery. So you will want to pop up that discovery. So to do this, people who are buying the shirts in the previous history, they have bought these 10 shirts. Let me show this shirt for them just because they had the same pattern. So that's what we are trying to do there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. I'll have to be watching for the results from that test when you guys do it.
Yeah. Amazing, Kirk. Thank you very much. And it's been really amazing to have you here. And we would love to do more. If you ever feel you want to rant, feel free to reach out to us. We will rant more, sit and explain things to our viewers. And we are based in India. And whenever you are visiting India, please come and visit us. We are happy to host you here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Kirk.